Hey everyone, my name is Carolina Gonzalez, and welcome to Searching for Success. The idea for this podcast was really born from the desire to utilize all of the skills that I've cultivated over the last 15 years in my career in a new capacity. Not that I wasn't given opportunities to be creative over the past year, but I had gone from working on multiple projects at a time that required a lot of time and energy, writing scripts, interviewing people, working with editors, being creative, to getting that on a much smaller scale with a lot of time in between. And so I was really desperate for more. But basically, about a year ago, in May of 2023, I was part of a large department layoff. And this was a job that I genuinely thought I could retire in. Obviously, there were things that I would have loved that were better, as in every job, but I had a lot of things that I was looking for leading up to that point. I was able to be creatively free. I was able to work from home and still get to travel. I was able to interview incredible people and work with such talented individuals. I learned so much in that job, and I really enjoyed bringing all of my experience prior to that point into that position and just continuously growing. So when I got that call, that Zoom, it really threw me for a loop. And I honestly never expected to react the way that I did or feel the way that I did. There were a lot of layers to this onion. So prior to me getting let go, a few months before that, I had sold my home in Florida. This was the very first home that I bought with my own money on my own. I loved that little townhouse. It was my safe space, and just I loved it so much. But I sold it. I moved to a new city, a new state. So I was away from my friends and my family, and that was probably the most change I had ever experienced in my life. I had moved before for other job opportunities, but I kind of always knew I was going to come back to Florida. And in this case, I was moving with work and also for the love of my life. So I didn't know if I was ever going to come back. It felt a little more final, which isn't a bad thing. I was really excited about it. I was up for the adventure. It was just different, and it was a lot of change that I was dealing with. And whenever anything big happens in my life, whether it's a big life change, a death, issues with friends, money problems, whatever it may be, the things I would lean on were my career, so just diving into work, my friends and family, because I have a very, very amazing group of people that surround me all the time, and travel. And so we had just moved into this new house, huge house, big mortgage. I don't want to say it was a mistake, but it was a little bit of a rush decision. And so it just was an immediate landslide of what the heck are we going to do now? So when that call came, I froze. I'm someone that I always, whenever things are happening and if there's an emergency, I tend to be reactive. I don't stay frozen. I don't fly away. I kind of react and we deal with it. And I think of myself as a problem solver, both in my career and in my life. But in this case, I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. I genuinely felt like a part of me had died. Who I was up to this point, everything I had worked for, all of my hopes, dreams, everything felt like it was just up in flames in that moment. And to make it just so much more fun, my boyfriend, who I was living with, also worked for that company. And so I had this constant reminder of what I had just lost. I mean, I was feeling these feelings of, I've been kicked out of this group that I was once a part of, and now I'm on the outside looking in. And I can't get in. I can't do anything to be included, involved, nothing. It was so gut-wrenching, and I didn't know why it was affecting me that way. The other people that I had talked to who were also in that department and also got let go that day, I don't know, right, for sure. But it seemed like they had a faster recovery because they didn't have this constant reminder. Not that I'm blaming him at all for the amount of time it took for me to recover. It was just another card that I was dealt, another hurdle that I had to get over in order to find myself again, get back on the road to move forward, and figuring out a way to turn my mess into a message. And so because I had my ways of dealing with big life issues, I've never really been depressed. Have I been sad? Of course. With breakups, deaths, of course, I've been sad. But again, I always had my career to lean on. I mean, I've been working since I was 13. And so I always had something to fall back on. My family, being able to go and travel, see the world, that always gave me a little bit more perspective and to make my problems seem smaller. But my career was the biggest thing that filled my heart with purpose, fulfillment, and joy. And now that was gone. And I had no idea how I was going to get out of this pit. I knew because of my faith and the way I was raised that I was going to be okay. I just wasn't sure exactly how or when or what it was going to take. I just knew it was going to happen, but I didn't know what to do because I was frozen. I mean, for that first week, I did not get out of bed. I cried uncontrollably. I felt very empty. I really had no idea what was next, what I was going to do, where my life was going to go. And in that same first week, my boyfriend, again, who was working for the company, actually had to go on a job with the very man who was my manager and had let me go that week before. And so there are so many mixed feelings that I never expected. They just came up. I was angry. I was jealous. I was so sad. I really wanted to be better. I couldn't get myself out of there. I felt so alone. I felt very isolated in this big new house that I was living in, laying in this giant bed, crying, staring out the window, looking at the leaves on the trees across the street and just thinking, what am I going to do? Everything that I had worked so hard for was just taken from me. And I don't know why. I mean, part of what this podcast is for is to talk to other professionals, mental health professionals that can potentially shed some light on why our minds react the way that they do. Why do we get so narrow-minded and get this tunnel vision where we can't see past what we're feeling in the moment? It took a lot of time to finally sit back up, open my computer, redo my resume, apply to jobs on LinkedIn, apply for unemployment. And that in itself was, a big accomplishment. And so finally being able to do that made me feel a little bit better. I started to get a little bit hopeful again, but it was a lot of up and down. I was in therapy. I talked to multiple therapists and they all kept telling me, this is normal. What you're going through is totally accurate. It's not out of the norm. You're just going to have to ride the waves and you'll get out of it eventually. But I am someone who likes to know the reasons why. I started doing a lot of reading to try to get to gain some insight on why I was thinking this way. Why couldn't I get myself out? Because I am a firm believer that we are very powerful beings and our brains are incredible and we can train them to be better. And I just didn't know why I had this block. I felt like the past 10, 15 years of my life, I had done a lot of self-help and work to become this strong, powerful individual that can handle her emotions, understood her emotions, but then it all came crashing down in a second. And it was taking me so long to put the pieces back together that was frustrating to me. Finally, after a few weeks, I was able to apply for jobs and get excited again. But even that was a whole nother thing in itself because I would get to the third or fourth round of interviews and I would still get no's, or I would get a rejection email without hearing from an actual person. You would go and see how many applicants were to the same job that you were applying to. And sometimes it would be over 700 applicants. And you would just think like, well, what are the chances they're going to even see mine? They're not going to look at it. So it was very disheartening. It was a lot of time of no after no after no. And that was an ego crusher, to say the least. It really made it difficult to keep moving forward because you're like, what's the point? Honestly, the only thing that got me through that time was traveling. I was able to just book some trips, whether it was for a weekend to see my family, a weekend to go somewhere new, a weekend with my boyfriend, to just do something. I needed that to really gain a little bit more perspective, because that's what had helped me in the past. So I made more of an effort to do that. And slowly, little by little, I was getting better. Therapy was helping, being able to talk it out and really dissect why I was feeling jealous, why I was feeling hurtful, how to move past that. And this is still a work in progress. I'm definitely not perfect. I still have those feelings, especially when my boyfriend gets sent on shows that were such a big part of what I was doing when I worked there. But it is getting better. A lot of those feelings came from not feeling fulfilled anymore and being scared that I wasn't going to get a job again that made me feel like I had this purpose. And honestly, I don't think I was really better until about November. Once Thanksgiving came around and we hosted it for the first time in our house, I felt more alive again. I felt like I was coming back to myself for real this time. It wasn't this facade that I was putting on to, get through the day, and if you smile, you can fake it till you make it. No, that was when I was really starting to be like, okay, it's okay. People have gone through worse and they've come out of it. I'm going to figure out what it is I want to do, and I'm going to find a way to make it happen, because I've made every goal of mine a reality because I've worked hard to do it. And I knew exactly what I wanted, and I pushed forward to get it. And I knew I was going to get to that again. So it felt good internally to get glimpses of myself again. And so a few weeks after that is when I really began to get more open-minded to the future and to think about how far my horizons could actually stretch. I may not have to work in production or TV per se to feel fulfilled. So I made a list of things that I absolutely loved and were deal breakers essentially for myself. Things that I needed to do or that needed to be incorporated into my next job. Number one was being able to interview people and tell stories. I loved talking to people, getting to hear where they've come from, what they're doing with their life, what they've learned, their life lessons, their hurdles that they've had to overcome. That to me was so fulfilling when I was doing it for TV that I wanted to make sure that I do that in some capacity in the next thing. Number two was being able to have a flexible schedule, work from home, because I am not an office girl. I am not productive in an office. I feel like I get a lot more done when I can do it on my own terms and still be able to, clean the kitchen or make a snack and just be in the comfort of my home or anywhere. If I want to be on the beach and working, I can do that. So I really wanted something that allowed that kind of flexibility. And then the third is being able to be creative. I'm someone that loves to learn. I love to be in a room full of people that are smarter than me. I want to grow and try new things and find better ways to do something that I've been doing, not necessarily wrong, but a better way. If someone can teach me a more efficient way to do something, oh my gosh, I love it. I wanted to do something that gave me that creative freedom in a space that allowed me to grow, but also where I could lead a team. I love looking at people and witnessing what their strengths and weaknesses are and being able to utilize those things in a more efficient way. I'm all about efficiency. It doesn't matter what it is, but I know that a lot of my skills can transfer over to different things. And I was determined to figure out what those things were. And it was so refreshing to feel like I could go on LinkedIn and search for jobs that were not TV content producer positions, because I was dead set. I'm like, I'm only looking for certain positions, and if I don't get it, well, at some point I'm going to, because someone told me that the person who ends up getting what they want is the one who held their breath the longest and just waited it out. So there were so many conflicting things going on during that entire process, but I felt free in that. And the second I went on LinkedIn and just searched up the jobs that were recommended to me, I felt so relieved. I don't know, it's those little wins. It's the little wins that you can find in the day-to-day that make up the road to recovery, at least in my opinion. And so the idea for this podcast was born. Initially, I was going to do it with a friend. And then I figured, well, I might as well just do it on my own and get it started and see where it goes. So I'm really excited to see what comes of this if anyone is listening or watching. It's mostly a therapy for myself. It's a way for me to do things that I love in a brand new way. And hopefully it reaches someone. Hopefully it makes an impact, encourages someone to keep moving forward or to turn your mess into a message. Because that's what I'm hoping to do. I was really scared of who I was when everything happened. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to stay in that headspace. And I was scared that even though I felt like I had the tools to move forward, I was terrified I wasn't going to be able to. Being able to be here and say that I'm fine. I'm genuinely okay and I'm excited for the future. I have a whole bunch of projects going on, and this one specifically is bringing me the most joy and the most excitement. Whether anyone listens to this or not, it's filling me with what I need. And so I hope that you enjoy it. I have some amazing guests lined up, and I just hope that you enjoy it and welcome to this journey with me. So my very first guest is a personal friend of mine. Her name is Cristina Rodriguez. Well, now she's married, so she's Cristina Rodriguez Davis. I don't think she hyphenated it, but that is her name. She currently lives in New Mexico. She has this badass husband with a badass job. She herself is a badass. She's created a nonprofit. She now works for another nonprofit. She's just really good at what she does. She's very passionate with what she does. And we had a little bit of connectivity issues because this was the very first guest. So it didn't feel too much like a conversation as much as I would have preferred. But she tells her story on the company that she created, the nonprofit, and basically how she needed to fail hundreds of times in order for it to succeed. And I really appreciate her take on what success looks like to her as her life and the business is evolving. And I just feel like she adds a lot to this episode. So I know it's not perfect. I promise it's going to get better, but I hope that you enjoy my conversation with Cristina. Have you moved into the new house yet?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, it's
gosh.
so awesome. I love it. It's my
I
favorite.
hope I get to go. I'm trying my best to convince Blaze for us to go together, but
Yeah, that'd be super fun. You guys can explore.
the whole point of this podcast is to really talk about people who've had goals for themselves and either something came in the way and made them pivot into a different direction and how you kind of dealt with that. And so why I thought you would be a perfect guest is because of your experience with finding mind and melody, coming from a place of like just true passion, and that even though not that it didn't turn out to be exactly what you wanted it to be, but now you've kind of, reworked your role. So tell me about your journey to finding Mind and Melody. Why did you create that? What was the drive behind it?
Yes, that's a good question. So when I was very, very young, like maybe 10 years old, I started playing the cello. And I've always really loved music. And I started noticing how music would impact me and my mental state, as well as um, the students around me. Like I noticed that a lot of the kids were in really advanced classes, and they were just really sharp and creative. And I thought, well, something must be happening in the brain that this exposure to music is causing. And so I started reading a lot about um, music and the brain. And there was this book by Oliver Sacks called Musicophilia that talked about how the brain pretty much is like extremely resilient, and especially when it comes to music. So there were people that had traumatic brain injuries, um, dementia, Parkinson's, and when they were exposed to music, either playing an instrument or singing a favorite song or dancing, the different issues that they were experiencing because of those illnesses seemed to disappear for a particular moment. And I thought that is fascinating and incredible, and there's no medication that can really do that. So I really started just honing into this idea of what could music really do for people? And I started volunteering at a hospital when I was 14 years old, and I used to walk around the hallways. It was is now Nicholas Hospital. Before it was Miami Children's Hospital, and I used to see a lot of kids that were around my age. And I thought, wow, what if I could create a room filled with instruments where the community could come in and create music without years of training? And it's something that they could hold on to and use as a coping mechanism as they are in this environment. So this idea sparked at that time, and it kind of stuck with me for many, many years. And I tried to implement it many years throughout from that when I was 14 years old to basically when it came to fruition, and I can tell you more about that. But um, basically, I wrote an email to the coordinator at that hospital that said, I would love to do this program, blah, 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 blah. It took me like years to eventually get the courage to do that. And then, like a couple weeks later, I got a message on my inbox that said, this person no longer works here. So I was just shocked and like so mad at myself for had waiting that long just to even to take one step as simple as sending an email because of fear of being rejected for an idea or what somebody would think about it. And so that was a really early lesson into, when you want to do things, like do them right away, even if it's a really small step that you're really scared of doing. Um, so then fast forward, I went to college and I studied biochemistry, and this idea of the music program was still in my head. So it was just kind of like still like knocking at me every single day. And I thought, like, I need to get this idea out of my head. It's driving me crazy just keeping it in here. Um, and and I wanted to. We had to write a thesis in order to graduate from school, and all of my professors always knew that I always had any like experiments that were relating around music and something, whether it was mice or people. Um, and I took this opportunity to propose this thesis, which was a music program that was specifically focused on dementia and Alzheimer's, and really honing in on the fact that when we think of dementia and Alzheimer's, we might think that it's just, that somebody's losing their memory or they can't speak anymore, and thinking of all their limitations versus looking at everything else that they can do and how we can adapt to fit the world that they're experiencing. And I thought there's so much more out there that could be done than just simply putting headphones on people and passively playing music. And I wanted to find a way to do that by also involving young people in the process. So we started at the FAU Memory and Wellness Center, which was around 45 minutes away from where I went to school in Jupiter at the Honors College. And my co-founder and I, Lauren Koff, we drove there almost every week to this center to start the program. And I remember when we launched it, we had put out like flyers at schools, at Starbucks, sent emails to high school students, college students. And the first day of the program, we had this one person who showed up with her cello. And we were just kind of like, okay, well, let's just play some music and let's see what happens. So there was no plan. There was no structure. It was just like, let's hope that someone shows up. And we were so happy that she did. And it was a really wholesome session. And little by little, we started getting more volunteers, more people involved. And we actually started creating the structure of the program and figuring out what worked, what didn't. And there was this one particular moment for me that was super like impactful, and it like reflected many of the things that I had read in the books that inspired me when I was much younger. And there was this gentleman named David, and he was probably like in his 80s, 90s, and he was in a wheelchair. He would just sit hunched over, not really making much eye contact. We would try to engage him with maracas, tambourines, like anything that we could, just conversation, a smile. And he would just not really respond until one day we found out he was a professional violinist. So we put a viola in his hands and he just began to play flawlessly. And he was smiling, he was communicating with us. Like I could ask him, David, how are you doing? He said, oh, I'm doing well. And for me, that was like, wow, that is incredible. Like this is exactly what I've read in the books, and I was so inspired to continue going. On the other hand, when I told my parents, "Hey, guess what? I'm not going to medical school," they weren't as thrilled. Um, so I'll stop there, but that was kind of the start of it all.
Well, okay, well, that's a huge pivot from going to planning on going to medical school to now throwing all of your time and energy into this nonprofit that you wanted to start. So, obviously, your parents weren't thrilled about it, but how did you feel personally about, you're going from a career track where you're guaranteed to kind of have a finished goal that you reach as long as you complete the program, do the grades, do all that stuff, to now something that it's such an unknown. It could fall flat or it could soar. So how are you feeling in that decision process time?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was definitely scary because, I've worked basically my entire like high school and college years towards this one particular goal. Like you mentioned, like the grades, the studying, all the classes, the degree, all to just say at that very last minute, guess what? I'm not doing it. We're gonna go this direction. I think there's something like the intuition is really important, and I was really interested in both of these paths, but there wasn't a career or this future, I guess, where this vision that I had or this feeling inside of me that kept telling me you need to do this program, you need to do it right, existed in the world. Like there wasn't a college where you could go and create Mind and Melody, um, right? So I think it was listening over the years, over and over to that voice that was inside of me, just telling me like, I really need to do this. I really need to do this. And I think when you have when you have something like that is guiding you and you're kind of suppressing it and you keep suppressing it over and over and over, that's a really good sign that you should probably just do the thing and try and fail. Because otherwise it just like it torments you and you torment everyone else around you by talking about this thing like every day. So I think that was
Well,
like a really like important moment.
well, how many times did you fail when you were starting out? Because obviously, starting a startup is never easy. I want to hear a little bit about the different hurdles and challenges that you face at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all need to develop a love relationship with failure because it's not really as negative as it like feels or it like has the connotation of being. For me, it's just like a trial and error. It's like when we first do anything, we hope that we're like excellent at it the first time, but it actually is that process of it, of the constant like losing and winning that makes it really enjoyable, and that later you can like say I succeeded, but you need to go through those little cycles. So I mean, I would say like I failed from the very beginning when I was 14, and it took me like, I don't know, 3 years or whatever to write a damn email. Like it was one sentence, that was a big fail.
I mean, when we first started Mind and Melody and trying to figure out like how we're gonna make money, we planned this fundraiser, and Lauren and I were probably like 20 or 21, and we had no fundraising experience, no network whatsoever. But I was part of this boxing gym. And I thought, what a great idea if we have a fundraiser where we have people come box, right? Fantastic. So you could probably imagine what happened. But anyways, I like spoke to the owner. They were all about it. We're gonna have like the gloves and the class and make it really fun for people. And then Lauren and I would go to like all the businesses around the community and just ask them for raffles or money or whatever. And we got vendors to go to this event. And I think we had like 5 people show up and we raised $300.
Wow.
And we probably spent like a month of our time like during the end of our like senior year when it's like super hectic doing this. And I think we came to the realization that we're just like, this is not gonna like work out in this way. So like it was a blessing that we had that experience and then we had to go through all that pain and struggle to then realize like, okay, we need to think of another avenue to get to the goal that we want because this one is not working. So what we did was kind of like, it wasn't really, here's the thing, like sometimes you don't even really know what the next thing is that you're supposed to do
Mm-hmm.
to get to that goal. And that can be super frustrating. And that's where you really, I think, have to, again, like mentally work through those emotions and feel like, okay, like I trust that I'm gonna find the way, but might make more mistakes or face more roadblocks as I get there. But as long as you have that vision of how to get there, like eventually you will. So for us, it was like we had a grant proposal that was due, and they were like, you need to have all the facilities secured for this program, all your partners, and it was due that day. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna find all these places? So what I did, I just got up, I went online, I looked up long-term care facilities in Miami, and I just started calling all of them and saying, Nick, we have this program, blah 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 blah. Like if you get this grant, it'll be free. And I remember someone was like, that sounds so great. Come in and I want you to tell me more about it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I prepared this presentation, this PowerPoint. I went to the meeting. I was telling the administrator about the program. And then at the end of the meeting, he's like, so how much does it cost? And I was like, my poker face, like $75. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I just made my first like sale or whatever when I wasn't even intended to. And then I realized, hey, wait a minute, like maybe this could be a way out. And I remember when I first received that check, that $75 check, I was just like, I was like so excited that that happened, even though it was such a small amount of money. But I think I think those are like the ways of finding the success and the paths, even though sometimes they're not really super clear. You kind of have to, trust the process and like see the opportunities that arise in that situation.
Yeah, it's definitely those small wins where you feel like you can, okay, I can hold on for one more day to figure out what the next thing is. And I personally, you've always been someone to me that is so good at picking yourself back up and problem solving. I've always thought that about you, even not even just with Mind and Melody, but just overall in life with everything that from all the years I've known you, it just has always felt that way. And I think because you are that way as well, it helped continue the growth for Mind and Melody to be so successful. I mean, I don't know the whole story from start to finish, but I mean, I know that it's still around and you developed this when? What year was it?
Yeah, so we have been in existence now for almost 10 years. It will be 10 years in December, which is crazy to me because I started this when I was 20 years old. Um, and we have grown so much over the years. And I've also experienced, when we were talking about quote unquote failures or challenges, especially with the pandemic, that was brutal. We lost all of our clients literally overnight before people really started realizing, like, hey, the world's about to shut down because we work in healthcare. So we had to rebuild the entire organization. But even though that happened, like, it's still like it allowed us to reassess, like, how are we doing things and how can we make it more efficient and where are the opportunities, right? So even though it was extremely difficult and all I wanted to do was cry or experience some of those moments where people are like, I have nothing to do today. I'm like, well, I have to figure out how the heck I'm going to keep this thing alive. So even though I wanted some of those moments, I'm like, I was supposed to be getting married and like my wedding was not happening and I had to be calling vendors to get my money back. Like, I really had to just like try to make things as objective as possible in that moment versus like what is a reality, what can I actually control and change versus like what am I feeling and not going to those rabbit holes even though you really want to like emotionally go there. I'm not saying not to process it, but definitely like give yourself 1 or 2 days to cry and then like all right, let's go. So I think there's been many of those kind of ups and downs throughout our journey. And I would say right now we're definitely at a high point. We have like over 250 sessions in Florida, like from Miami all the way to the Treasure Coast, and then also in Tallahassee. We have some programs in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Los Alamos, New Mexico, as well as virtual programs like across the country, in Chicago and New York. So that's super super exciting, and I think over the years too, it has taken a while, like as a founder and as a leader of the organization, to figure out like how do I utilize my talents the best? And also, how can I do the things that I really enjoy versus the things that I have to do? Because in the beginning, when you have no money, you kind of have to do it all. You have to do the sales, you have to do the marketing, you have to do the operations, you have to do the management. Like it's so much and it can be so overwhelming, especially if some of those things are not your strong suits. Like I used to hate, like despise public speaking, especially when it came to pitch competitions. And I think I've won like over 10 pitch competitions with like over, $200,000 or more in awards. But that's taken a lot of work because either you can decide like, hey, I'm going to shy away from what I'm bad at, or I'm going to like go at it head on and still struggle and may have to have different methods of how I get there. Because this piece of it is super essential for me moving forward. Then you get to a point where you can start hiring people to do those things they're better at it than you are. And that's always a great moment. But in the beginning, it's kind of like a give and take. And so I think right now my role really has shifted to a point where I'm more at a high level at the organization and I'm not so rooted like in the day-to-day operations, which for me is super helpful because it gives me more like vision. Like I love to dream big and think big and really help like guide our team as to how to get from point A to point B versus like dealing with a like client issue or worrying about a musician that had, something that happened. So more and more I've really been working on designing the organization that way where I can focus more on the things that I enjoy and that I'm good at. And also like balancing the work for the people that work in our team, because also the same thing applies when you're really really small team. Everybody kind of has to do everything, and not everybody's always good at everything. That can create a lot of strain for your team as well. And again, like I can think of those ebbs and flows where we've had to, sometimes like the best thing you can do for a team member is like, hey, this is not working out. Like, how can I help you find what your next step is? Which I think for sometimes that can be like a negative thing between an employer and an employee. Like, oh, there's tension, like they're underperforming, yada yada.
But it's
Versus like
necessary.
remembering to, it is necessary. But I think sometimes like the way that I've seen some managers deal with it is like, like they're angry or they're annoyed that the person's underperforming, and then maybe they create a plan, but it's just kind of like, "Ugh, this person didn't work out or whatever. Versus kind of like understanding where the person's at and then figuring out a way that, you kind of lead them out of the
I feel like that
organization.
you
Um,
could see the difference between a good leader and a weak leader in how they handle people's weak strengths and weaknesses. Like I feel like a good leader knows how to utilize what Christina's really good at versus what John's really bad at, and kind of putting them on the same team and balancing each other out. Whereas if you have a bad leader that doesn't know how to do that, they respond the same way you just did of it's not working out. They're not figuring it out. They can't find their place in this right now.
but I mean, sometimes you really just, even though you restructure all the puzzle pieces, you just have to get rid of one of the puzzle pieces. And sometimes that can be really difficult emotionally, especially when you have had a relationship with someone for so long, to be like, hey, this is not working. Like, how about exit totally and figure out something else for you and redefine what success looks like. Because that's sometimes where I see like uh, where that doesn't like line up for people.
I love how you've been on both ends of it too. In this conversation, you've gone from the beginning to you trying to figure out what success for Mind and Melody looks like to how to figure out what success looks like for someone on your team at Mind and Melody.
Absolutely. Like, I feel that the success of an organization, which is like an organism on its own, is like as correlated to the how people who are driving that change view success and feel success. And I feel like through all the teams that I've had, like the ones that were where that is aligned for everyone and in similar ways, that's where you see like a super high peak in the success of the organization, but also in the individuals. And I think that's like the best point to be at. Because if it's not working
100%.
for the people, they're miserable when they're coming or they're struggling and they don't like their job, like it just creates friction and then the work doesn't move. Um, so it's like, yeah, I think it's super important to invest time into those relationships with employees and all stakeholders that kind of have touch points to whatever you're trying to build or move forward.
Now that you've reached this like level of like you're more removed and you can look more at the vision of it, now you have more free time to kind of, right? You have some free time to be able to utilize some of the skills that you've learned from that whole process in a different capacity, right? So if you've been using it with CodeGenerate, I would love to just hear why you transitioned to that, why you got involved with them, what about CodeGenerate you connect to, and just talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I really crave or where my skills are in like big visions, and I like really messy problems. And this opportunity came up with CodeGenerate, where they had just redefined their name from Encore to CodeGenerate. So Encore was this idea of like, even though you retire, it's not really retirement. It's like the next phase, the next chapter of your life and how you can make the most out of it. And really focusing on the intergenerational relationships that help drive that, which is like at the core of what we do at Mind and Melody. Like, we wouldn't be able to do what we do if we didn't have those intergenerational relationships driving our programs. So I was really interested when they renamed themselves to CodeGenerate, which is basically bringing younger and older generations together to solve problems in society. So it's kind of this umbrella that can be applied or strategy to many different problems. And I thought, wow, that's really exciting. Definitely fits into Mind and Melody. Mind and Melody solves many different problems, but one of them you could look at it as isolation and loneliness for both youngers and olders. The seniors that are experiencing dementia and Alzheimer's, and also the musicians that are working to create that music experience with the seniors together. So it really resonated with me. I was also part of one of their innovation fellowships a few years ago, and they were launching this challenge, and like anything that's a challenge, I'm like, I'm in. So it was called the CodeGen Challenge to Advance Economic Opportunity. And I thought, wow, that like sounds fascinating. I like figuring out the parameters, figuring out like the scope of the work. What does that actually mean? What are the solutions we're looking for? What would this accelerator program look like? Um, and I really so this experience is we selected 10 innovators across the country that are working to solve um, economic issues in their communities, all from the opioid crisis to homelessness, to the workforce issues with substitute teachers, redistribution of land and land acquisitions as we think about the next silver tsunami where there's going to be the largest wealth transfer from boomers to other generations. And I thought,
Mm.
this is fascinating, and I get to work with entrepreneurs. I've had an experience myself, so I thought this can really be something that I can like work side by side with these innovators and relate to some of the issues and challenges and the journeys that they've gone through. So I really wanted to be part of that. And I think it's been a super like amazing experience so far in trying to build that, and also going into a new ecosystem where I'm not the person who's like ultimately the end decision maker, and trying to also figure out, which is fine with me, but I think trying to figure out like how do you influence a culture but not dominate it, and also like help move the work forward. And that's been a really interesting experience for me, a growth experience, and as well a really challenging experience. Is a lot of the work that CoGenerate does is around narrative change, which is something that I've had to like kind of flip my brain around a bit more, because when you're a small organization, you don't have a lot of time to do that. You're like, we gotta do the work on the ground, and we gotta go work clients, we gotta do this, and this. Whereas here is a different focus, and they're focusing more on storytelling and changing the perception of what people see and how they see it, which is like fascinating, right? Like we think of so many things that we take for granted now. Like let's say like, oh, you should have I don't know, like anything around the healthy eating culture or like exercise or whatever, right? All
Or
these
even
things are
mental
like
health.
natural. Yeah, and mental health. The doctor recommends it, but it took like people to focus on that for years and years and years, changing the story, changing the narrative for it to become an accepted idea in society. Um, so to me, that's been extremely challenging and also fascinating because my brain doesn't always think in that way. I'm more of a builder and doer versus like, I don't know, storyteller or something. So different.
I definitely think that you are more of a storyteller than you think.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. I guess maybe it's just, changing that switch in my brain.
Yeah, I mean, just the way that you speak about all of this, it's very eloquent, and you're telling it with a beginning, middle, and end, which is what a storyteller does.
Okay, well, I'm glad. This is good practice then.
Like, what's next for you? What is the next 5 years? I know that you're starting a family, you just bought a house, like you're settling into this role, but what's success for you now these days?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question because I feel like success is an evolving definition. Um and sometimes like I described, like you go years and working towards something that you think was success, and then you have an experience or something just doesn't sit right, and you're like, you know what, I need to redefine what this looks like for me. And I haven't thought about too much what success looks like in this next chapter, because I feel like um, going into it as a new mom is probably going to shift everything for me, but I can't anticipate what that's going to be. But like on a really practical level for me, success right now looks like making sure that I balance like my energy. And what I mean by that is that I don't like overwork too much because I have a tendency to do that. Or which then leads to anxiety. So that's not great. So really, really like focusing on controlling that and kind of letting things go and trying to shift away more so from my perfectionist tendencies. Um, so continuing to work on that, and really like building time to like balance it all, balance like this new little human that's going to be born, and I can't control any of it, and I just have to kind of go through whatever's going to be thrown at me. um so I think that's where I'm at right now. um yeah.
Oh, girl, we all want a little bit of control of our lives, and it's never gonna happen.
Yes, yes, that's the that is the, I guess, the false thing that we've been sold, right? Like that you can actually control things. And like there is some extent of control, but sometimes things will happen when they happen, and you kind of have to just roll with the punches.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, those are the biggest lessons that I've learned in this year of just, relinquishing my chokehold on what I thought life was going to look like at this point, right? Like just being like, whatever, I'm doing what I can, I'm doing my best, and whatever happens, happens.
Yes, yes, yes. Um, yeah, I've also experienced that like physically with my body, where it's like, I was able to do mountain biking and skiing and having this super active lifestyle, and like being able to move things by myself and like lift them, and it's like that has kind of been taken away. And instead of like focusing on like, oh man, I can only lift like 20 pounds now because otherwise I'm like completely out of breath, or I feel like I don't know, something's gonna break. I'm just kind of like, this is my body for now. This is not forever. And we're just going to do the best I can. Like, I can only walk like 2 or 3 miles without being in pain. And it is what it is. So, adjusting to that has also been a challenge.
Yeah,
But
reminding ourselves that everything's
hopefully,
temporary helps too, for sure.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, not everything lasts forever, which is like a morbid thing, but also, it depends on when you need it to be over. It is a helpful thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I think this is great. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add about your story or whatever is coming next, but yeah, I think this was great. It sucks that you couldn't hear me in real time and that there's so many audio issues, but I could hear you perfectly.
Oh, that's okay, Carol. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see like how the podcast evolves, and how other people relate to this topic of success. Because it's definitely something that we have been taught to like strive for, or somehow it's been defined in a particular way for us since we were, I think, children, going to school and then go to college and then do whatever, whatever. That idea of success has definitely been ingrained. And so I'm really curious to see how the rest of your guests and people respond to this idea.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. I'm glad that you were the first because I feel more comfortable with you to like work out all these kinks. I hope we can fix them for the next time, but I hope we can have you again too at some point once everything's a little bit more, I don't know, professional, I guess, working.
Yes, yes. Sounds good. I would love to.